name is Krishna Burra, and I am very proud to serve as the Director of Education for the Limestone District School Board. It's the largest school board in the Kingston area and has a fully inclusive public education institution that will proudly serve any student or family, regardless of their identity, in Limestone. Our goals for all students, families, and staff are to see themselves in Limestone. In the minutes I have to speak this evening, I am going to speak bluntly because the stakes of our work in serving students and the communities we serve are hugely significant. Education matters for many reasons, including shaping our community and its future. As a school system, we can help mitigate the impact of social and economic challenges that some families face. We can provide pathways for students and families that allow for social mobility. And in this work, we must continually strive to ensure all student identities based on the Ontario Human Rights Code are protected and people are treated with dignity. And in Limestone, we work to ensure students find value, purpose, and hope in our system as they progress from kindergarten to grade 12. The role of education in creating and supporting social change is unquestionable. As the late Nelson Mandela so eloquently said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. We must remember that schools and classrooms belong to the community. We all need to be invested in our schools and public education. We all need to recognize and create shared interests, and all need to seek impact. Polarization, hopelessness, and alienation are the real context at this stage of the pandemic. We are in the midst of a mental health and wellness crisis for many people, and in particular, children and youth. We are greatly impacted by what we see and hear south of the border, and in echo chambers and algorithms of social media. And we must continue to be very conscious of the very real economic impacts that have impacted people unevenly in the past 3 years. In addition, we must recognize that our communities continue to be impacted by global events that have resulted in different newcomers seeking a new home in our community. Our schools in Limestone will always be open to welcoming any newcomer who finds their way to this area. The Canadian Colours Kingston Foundation states that its goal, quote unquote, is to create a community that understands, embraces, and respects everyone's cultural, religious, and/or ethnic beliefs to ensure these are passed on for generations to come. This should be done together with accepting and following Canadian values and culture, since Canada is where we now live. This will result in a community that is truly diverse with a strong connection to Canadian values, close quote. The values of Limestone align with the goals of the Canadian Colours Kingston Foundation in focusing on the need for acceptance and understanding across people's identities. This being said, we must recognize that diversity is the increasing reality in the Kingston area. True acceptance, belonging, inclusion, respect, and dignity are not always offered immediately. However, they should also not have to be earned. Working towards a social environment where everyone can be accepted, belong, included, be respected, and be treated with dignity is still very much collective work in progress in this community and in this country. For better and at times for worse, as a school system, we directly represent the values, thoughts, and perspectives of the communities that we serve. As I've indicated, we have a critical role in creating and supporting social change and upholding all 17 protected grounds in the Ontario Human Rights Code. This work requires the support of the community and ensuring as many people as possible recognize and defend all of the protected grounds in the code. The protected grounds in the code are not a multiple choice exercise where people can pick and choose which grounds to protect and which ones can slide or be ignored. As a student of history, the forces for continuity and change have always ebbed and flowed. Anytime change occurs, it creates a backlash and conflict. It is important to recognize the similarities over time that have occurred in reaction to social change. It is also interesting to see the same reactions, propaganda, and arguments that have been made at different points in Canadian history continue to emerge in response to more current waves of change, whether it is immigration or other personal identities. At Pier 21 in Halifax, there's a quote that resonates through Canadian history, and I know MP Garrettson made this comment a little bit earlier as well. A Canadian is an immigrant with seniority. Other than the Indigenous peoples that have populated this land for tens of thousands of years prior to immigrants and settlers arriving, Canada's history is a history of immigration. The seniority part of the quote I cited is a telling feature of our past. Every new wave of immigrants to this country, often from lands without previous resident populations in Canada, was not always welcomed with open arms, and people faced significant challenges as they adapted to their new home. Don't get me wrong, relative to other places, the growing pains of social change in Canada have been relatively successful and a model for other countries, but it has not been without struggle, and it continues to require intentional work and support. Canada is a great country, and Kingston is a great city, but we must work to ensure that that continues to be the case. Work tied to personal dignity and respect is deeply personal for me. Because of the stakes involved in education and other aspects of life, when we think about individual people, we need to think about their identity and whether it serves as a tailwind or a headwind. I serve in a position of privilege, and I have experienced considerable tailwinds of privilege during my life. Both of my parents were professionals in the Kingston community. However, when I reflect and overlay components of my identity that have served as headwinds at times, without my privilege to compensate, my life could have turned out very much differently. I was reminded of this in a meeting with a focus group of racialized students that I met with just a few weeks ago. One of the students directly asked me how I would recommend they react when their close friends and other peers commit microaggressions or use slurs against them. I was immediately transported back in time 30 to 40 years ago when I walked the halls of this school as an LCVI student and across the street when grade 7 and 8 students were at Calvin Park and in that building. I am a product of a mixed race marriage. My mother comes from a farming family with multiple generations of history in the Prince Edward County area just outside of Wellington. My father immigrated to Canada in the mid-1960s as part of the first generation of racialized people that were welcome to this country if they scored enough points to gain entry. It is important to remember that when we consider Canada's past, and I was starkly reminded of this last fall when I visited the Komagata Maru Memorial in Vancouver, the conversation with students also reminded me of the different time my sister and I faced in the early 1980s when our parents divorced and my mother then entered a lesbian relationship. The struggle between my personal identity and social identity became abundantly clear in my own conscience. We must all think back to our childhood and adolescence and remember that all young people want to do every day is avoid embarrassment and feeling different. This should not be too much to ask. I hope we can all agree that more kindness and empathy is what we need from everyone. Many children and youth must still grapple with the ongoing conflict that occurs within them between their personal identity and their social identity. To save a bit of time, I will not go into detail on how I responded to this student's question, but this inner conflict is what we must continue to work to ameliorate. I did articulate that my 51-year-old self does feel shame about how my younger self tried to hide or deny aspects of my identity. Everyone should always feel comfortable in their skin, regardless of their identity. And this must be regardless of their race, ancestry, color, ethnic origin, place of origin, citizenship, religion, language, disability, family status, marital status, gender identity, gender expression, sex, or sexual orientation. I mention all of the protected grounds relevant to education because all are of equal importance to ensure respect and dignity for all individuals. I hope and trust that you share my commitment to each and all of the components of the Ontario Human Rights Code because my children, your children, and all children deserve nothing less, and our continuing intentional hard work to ensure broader acceptance and compliance with the code is critical. This is why in Limestone we have launched our human rights reporting tool, focused attention on diversifying the curriculum resources in classrooms to ensure students see themselves in the curriculum. Focused efforts on diversifying our workforce to ensure it more closely resembles the students we serve because there is no question representation matters. It is also why in Limestone we will be launching a Student Equity Senate in the fall so we can further listen to, observe, and empower the students we serve. It is why we continue to support 3 central staff focused on human rights and equity, diversity, and inclusion work, including a human rights and equity advisor. It is why the Limestone Indigenous Education Team continues to grow. It is why we must continue to ensure Indigenous education is provided to all students. It is why we must continue to support the growth of Indigenous languages. It is why we will continue to unpack and report on identity disparities in Limestone that exist in all education systems and within the broader community. It is why we will continue to review and revise our Equity Action Plan. It is why we will continue to focus attention on and privilege the voices of those students who are not finding academic success and wellness in our system. and among others, why we will continue to report publicly on what students are telling us through the Student Equity Census, the Human Rights Reporting Tool, and Student Voice sessions. This work matters, and we have a collective responsibility to ensure children and adolescents find respect and dignity at all times. We must all value individuality while also celebrating our shared humanity. Our recent Limestone report showing racial, first language, and religious disparities in how students feel provide guidance to us for the importance of the work in making a difference to young people. The findings in the report made it clear that Black and racialized students, and Jewish and Muslim students in particular, do not have the same sense of belonging and acceptance experienced by other students. Undoubtedly, additional report based on other personal identities will echo similar sentiments in different identity areas. In the same racialized student focus group that I mentioned earlier, I was also asked by a student whether I was hopeful about whether we will see progress and more social change. This time I will share my response and my assessment, which was very blunt. Based on what I am seeing and hearing, I am actually less optimistic now than if I was asked the same question a few years ago, due to louder retrograde perspectives entering public discourse. But this only means more intentional collective efforts will be required to continue to make progress. Focusing less attention on this or ignoring identity disparities is not an option. We can also be hopeful because time after time, younger demographics tend to have more progressive perspectives and are more open to change than older generations. As you can tell, I am very passionate about this work, and I have been delighted to share a few of the things we are doing in Limestone to ensure all students find value, purpose, and hope in seeing themselves in Limestone, where all students can thrive regardless of their identity. As I indicated earlier, our goals and values in Limestone align with those of the Canadian Colours Kingston Foundation in creating greater acceptance, understanding, and harmony across identities. But we must remember collectively that we both still have much work ahead of us. I look forward to that journey.
Community is at the heart of what we do. This is your TV, truly local.